Well, welcome to Baptism Sunday. My name is Caleb, and it's just so good to be with you. We've got some of our church people already at the beach, and so thanks for joining us as we heard testimonies, and we're going to take communion together in a moment. I'm going to preach for like 10 minutes, and then we're going to hear some more testimonies and take communion, and hopefully we're going to be out of here in about 15 minutes. And so what I really just want to share with us very briefly is really the heart of why we have gathered together this morning. And that is the gospel. You see, the gospel is the cornerstone of the Christian faith. If you're a believer or you've been in church for a while, this won't be news to you. But have you ever thought about the fact that without the gospel, all we really have is religion? All we've got is rules and traditions and things to do. Without the gospel, we don't have a relationship with God. Have you ever thought about the fact that without the gospel, no matter how hard you try to change your life, you will be unable to change because it is the gospel that gives us the power to transform. You see, the gospel, many Christians forget this. The gospel is not just this one-time doctrine that is the front door to Christianity. You kind of walk through it once and then you're done. No, the gospel is much more than that. It's a power that saves us and shapes us Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And yet for me, even walking with Jesus now for 2 decades, my confession to you is that I still struggle to believe the gospel. I don't know about you. I struggle to believe. And interestingly, I was looking through the gospels to see what Jesus had to say about this idea of believing in him and believing in his work. And I came across John chapter 6, verses 29. And I've never thought about it this way, but this is what Jesus says. He says, the work of God is this, to believe in the one who he has sent. What is the hard work of Christianity when we gather on a Sunday? The hard work is believing what we just sang, that you are free. The hard work, Martin Luther said, we beat the gospel into our heads because we forget and we struggle to believe. And so I want to very briefly speak about how we can believe in Jesus and his work on the cross, how we can be a people rooted even more deeply in this beautiful truth. And so this text is really simple. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. I'm going to just divide it into two very simple parts. The old and the new. Very simple. The old and the new. Paul says the old has gone. What does gone mean? Anyone want to guess? What does gone mean? Give me a synonym. It disappears. What else? Yes. You never see it again. Exactly. It's gone. It's passed away. Paul says in Romans chapter 6, your old self was crucified. In other words, it's gone. You never see it again. What does that mean? It means that for those that follow Jesus, you don't have to be defined by your past mistakes. You don't have to be defined by your past, period. Your past doesn't determine your future. For example, if someone's in here today and you're struggling with addiction or dishonesty or anger or pride, Jesus is offering a new identity this morning. Tim Keller says it this way. He says, being a new creation in Christ means your identity is no longer tied to your past, but instead rooted in God's promise. Isn't that just like the best news ever? Your identity is no longer tied to your past. Everything you've done, the things you shouldn't have done, the things you didn't do but you should have done. That's what Paul means when he said the old is gone. The old has gone. Period. The new has come. He doesn't just say the old's gone. He says something has replaced this, and that is the new. This is, just by the way, we're all like, this is simple. This is simple, beautiful gospel truth this morning. And part of my prayer is that this won't grow old on us. Paul says the new is here. New does not mean refurbished. Any of you gone on eBay? You see all these refurbished products? I play golf, so I'll often go on eBay and I'll find refurbished Titleist Pro V1 golf balls, fraction of the price. Just a little shout out for Titleist there. It's not refurbished. That's not what Paul's talking about. He's talking about something completely different, brand new. Rick Warren says we're not only forgiven, we are transformed. God doesn't just wipe the slate clean. He gives us a completely new slate. See, this is like having a brand new blank canvas. And this means that no matter how stuck you feel, if you are in Christ, the canvas is blank. It's pure. It's white. It's perfect. When you put your faith in Jesus, Jesus declares you brand new. And just, by the way, you're not big enough to mess it up. You're not big enough to mess it up. If Jesus says, you are new in me, your actions, your lack of actions, your sin, nothing you do is big enough to change your identity. I want to show us what this means. I want you to imagine that your life is like this little whiteboard here, okay? And by the way, this before many of us met Christ, we were these people, liars, addicts, pride, lust, sinners, selfish, imperfect. All these labels, all these sins attached to our lives. When you come to Jesus, this is not what the gospel is. Jesus doesn't come with a Sharpie and be like, oh, you're not that anymore. You're not that anymore. And he doesn't come to try and cross out all these things that you are. Because if he did, there would still be mess. There would still be remnants. You would still have a sense that you're carrying baggage. Jesus does not do that. That is not the gospel. Instead, 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, the old has gone. What did you say? You said the old is gone. He said the old is gone. The old is gone. There it is. So the old has gone. The new has come. Now you might be thinking to yourself, okay, but what does that exactly mean? Because if you're anything like me, we still struggle with sin. This is the beauty of the gospel. That when you find yourself sinning, the gospel does not grow old. The words of Jesus do not change. All that happens is that you get another blank page. Pretend there's nothing there. You get another blank page, brand new. And then what happens? Again. And kids, this is as applicable to your parents as it is to you. Because all of us struggle. We all make mistakes. We all lack faith. We struggle with money. We struggle with pride and selfishness and all these things. This is by no means an excuse to sin. Paul wrote about that in Galatians. But this is the truth of the gospel, that every time we do sin, it's not like God is coming with a Sharpie and crossing these things out. He's actually given you a brand new page every single time. This is why the gospel is so profound. This is why it's work to believe this. Because how often do we come together as the people of God and we're actually probably more functioning in this space? We're like, I know God forgives me, but I kind of still see these things in my life. So I don't feel like I can really worship God, or I can't really lead, I can't really serve because I know God's forgiven me, but I still kind of have these issues, and I still I still feel unworthy and I still feel unqualified. That is not the gospel. That's why when we sing these songs, we said one of the lyrics said, I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I try to hide. It was my tomb until I met you. When we sing these songs, we're actually supposed to stir up faith in our hearts and take Jesus at his word. We're supposed to remind ourselves of the gospel, that if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. Even when we sin, our identity stays brand new. John Piper says this. He says, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creature. The old has passed away. God's mercy has begun a work in you that no one can undo, not even you. And so as a church, this is the hard work we're called to. The work of God is this, John chapter 6, verses 29, to believe in the one He has sent. I pray that we would believe more fully. I pray that we would believe more wholeheartedly. I pray that we would believe more faithfully, because the gospel isn't just the front door. It's life every day. And the accuser, who the New Testament speaks about Satan as the accuser, his primary attack on the church is this. It's not necessarily legalism. It's kind of like moderate grace. I know God kind of forgives me, but I don't know if I forgive myself. I know God says He forgives me and I'm a new creature, but I know that's kind of just like things we say. I don't really feel that. Faith tells us we must take Jesus at His word and we must fully believe in the gospel. And so